"Everything's mine now," my stepmother Vanessa announced with a smile at my father's funeral reception. The words weren't shouted across the room, just a cold, casual statement whispered to her sister while they thought I couldn't hear. But those 3 words cut deeper than the sharpest knife ever could. I stood frozen by the memorial photo display, watching her manicured fingers adjust my father's gold watch on her wrist, a watch he'd always promised would be mine someday. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The funeral home was filled with faces I barely recognized. Colleagues from my father's law firm, neighbors from the upscale neighborhood where he and Vanessa had lived for the past 5 years, and a scattering of relatives who seemed more interested in the catered food than in actual grieving. The air felt heavy with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, making it hard to breathe as I clutched a small photo of Dad and me from before Vanessa had entered our lives. I had tried to blend into the background, to be invisible as I always seemed to become whenever Vanessa was around. My plain black dress, the nicest one I owned but nothing compared to her designer funeral attire, felt suddenly inadequate as her gaze locked with mine across the room. She knew I'd heard her. The slight arch of her perfectly shaped eyebrow and the almost imperceptible curl of her lips told me everything. She wasn't just claiming her inheritance, she was savoring her victory. "Elena, darling," she called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Come join us. We were just talking about what to do with your father's summer house. You always loved it there, didn't you?" Every eye in the room turned toward me. I felt my cheeks burn as I took a hesitant step forward. The summer house had been my mother's favorite place before she died when I was 12. Dad and I had kept it exactly as she left it, her books still on the shelves, her garden tools still hanging in the shed. The thought of Vanessa selling it, or, worse, redecorating it with her modern, soulless aesthetic made my stomach clench. "I thought Dad wanted to keep it in the family," I managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended. Vanessa's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, sweetheart. It is staying in the family. I am family." She reached out to pat my hand, her diamond rings catching the light. "Don't worry. I'll let you come visit, once the renovations are complete, of course." Her sister Judith snickered behind her champagne glass, and a few of Vanessa's friends exchanged knowing looks. My father had only been in the ground for 3 hours, and already his memory was being erased, reshaped into something that suited Vanessa's narrative. I had known this day would come. From the moment Dad had introduced me to Vanessa 6 years ago, with her perfect smile and calculated charm, I had sensed the wedge she would drive between us. I was 22 then, just finishing college, and Dad was still grieving Mom even after 10 years. Vanessa had seemed like a hurricane of life and color sweeping into our quiet existence. Dad was enchanted immediately. "Your father needs this," my aunt had told me when I expressed concerns. "He's been alone too long. Be happy for him." So I tried. I smiled through their whirlwind romance. I helped plan their wedding 3 months later. I pretended not to notice how Vanessa's eyes narrowed whenever Dad mentioned my mother or when he and I shared private jokes. I ignored the way family photos of the 3 of us, Dad, Mom, and me, gradually disappeared from the walls, replaced by artistic black and white portraits of Vanessa and Dad. The first Christmas after they married, Dad gave me Mom's pearl necklace. "She would have wanted you to have this now," he said, his eyes misty with memory. Vanessa's smile had frozen as she watched me clasp it around my neck. The next morning, the necklace was gone from my overnight bag. When I frantically searched the guest room, Vanessa appeared in the doorway. "Looking for something?" she asked. "Mom's pearls. They were in my bag last night." "Oh, those old things?" She waved dismissively. "Your father agreed they should be properly stored in the safe. They're too valuable to be carried around carelessly." I never saw the necklace again. And when I mentioned it to Dad later, he seemed confused, almost embarrassed. "Vanessa says she put them somewhere special for you," he mumbled. "For when you're more settled." That was the beginning. The gradual, systematic removal of my place in Dad's life. The missed calls that Vanessa claimed she had forgotten to tell him about. The changed holiday plans I only discovered through social media posts. The family heirlooms that mysteriously needed professional appraisal and never returned. Dad and I had always been close after Mom died. We healed together, building a relationship based on shared grief and genuine love. But as his health began to decline 3 years ago, that connection became increasingly filtered through Vanessa. "Your father's very tired today," she would say when I called. "The doctor says too much excitement isn't good for his heart," she explained when my visits were cut short. "He's resting now. I'll tell him you stopped by," she promised when I drove 2 hours to see him, only to be turned away at the door. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I should have fought harder. I should have demanded to see him, to speak to him directly. But the glimpses I caught of him, thinner, grayer, his once sharp eyes clouded with medication, made me hesitate. What if confronting Vanessa actually did worsen his condition? What if my suspicions were just paranoia, jealousy of the woman who had taken my mother's place? So I retreated. Sent cards that received no response. Left voicemails that were never returned. Watched from a distance as Vanessa's control tightened like a noose around what remained of our family. When the call finally came that Dad had passed, it wasn't even from Vanessa. It was from his old law partner, Marcus, his voice gruff with emotion. "Elena, I'm sorry. Your father, he's gone. Heart failure, early this morning. I just spoke to him last week," I whispered, though this was a lie. I hadn't actually heard my father's voice in nearly 4 months, despite my calls. He sounded fine. There was an uncomfortable pause. Really? Vanessa said he hadn't been able to take calls for weeks. The funeral arrangements were already complete by the time I arrived in town. Vanessa had planned everything, the sleek modern casket that looked nothing like anything Dad would have chosen, the impersonal service at the funeral home rather than the church where he and Mom had married, the caterer known for serving the social elite rather than Dad's favorite local deli that had provided food for every family gathering for decades. "Your father and I discussed all of this," she assured me when I questioned a particularly out-of-character flower arrangement. "He wanted everything to be elegant and dignified." I bit my tongue, remembering how Dad used to joke that when he died, he wanted a New Orleans-style celebration with jazz music and his favorite whiskey served to all. There was no music at this service except for recorded classical pieces that Vanessa selected. No whiskey, just expensive champagne that Dad would have called pretentious. Now, standing in the reception line as people offered condolences, I felt like an intruder at my own father's funeral. Vanessa received each guest like a queen accepting tribute, her grief performed to perfection, a delicate dab at dry eyes, a brave smile through tears that never fell, a trembling hand that somehow always managed to display her diamond wedding ring to its best advantage. "And this is Elena, David's daughter from his first marriage," she would add as an afterthought when introducing me, the slight emphasis on first, making it clear that I was a relic of a past best forgotten. I nodded and shook hands mechanically, wondering if anyone else could see through the charade. Did any of these people actually know my father? The Real David Bennett who laughed too loudly at bad jokes, who could recite entire scenes from old Western movies, who kept a jar of peanut butter in his desk drawer because he claimed it helped him think better. "Your father was a fine man," a silver-haired gentleman told me, pumping my hand. "Vanessa has been absolutely devoted these past months. Barely left his side." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. According to Marcus, Dad had been asking for me during his final weeks, confused by my absence. "I told him you'd been there," Marcus had confided quietly before the service. I couldn't bear for him to think otherwise. As the reception continued, I drifted toward the edge of the room, watching as Vanessa held court. Her sister Judith hovered nearby, occasionally whispering in her ear and casting smug glances in my direction. They had always been a team, those two, with their matching highlighted hair and coordinated designer outfits. Judith had never married or had children of her own, making Vanessa's conquest of my father's wealth all the more convenient. "Did you see Elena's face when Reverend Phillips talked about family?" I overheard Judith snicker. "As if she's been around at all these past years." Vanessa's response was too low to hear, but the satisfied smile that followed told me enough. In their version of reality, I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her ailing father, leaving saintly Vanessa to care for him alone. I slipped out to the hallway, needing air, space, anything to escape the suffocating performance. The funeral home's back corridor was quiet, lined with bland watercolor paintings and generic inspirational quotes about grief and healing. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, trying to center myself. "Rough day?" I startled, turning to find Marcus standing a few feet away, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered one to me with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. At 72, he looked every bit the distinguished attorney he was, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, bow tie slightly askew as always. "Thanks," I murmured, accepting the coffee. The warmth of the cup against my palms was oddly grounding. "Your dad would have hated this circus," Marcus said bluntly, gesturing toward the reception room. "All this pageantry." A surprised laugh escaped me, quickly stifled. "That's exactly what I was thinking." Marcus's eyes, sharp despite his age, studied me carefully. "When was the last time you actually spoke to your father, Elena?" I hesitated, embarrassed by the truth. "February, I think." Vanessa usually answered the phone. Said he was sleeping or at therapy or too tired. Marcus nodded slowly. That's what I figured. You know, your dad asked me to handle his will about 3 years ago. Right after his first heart attack. I didn't even know he had a heart attack. 3 years ago, I admitted, shame washing over me. Vanessa told me it was just exhaustion. Marcus sipped his coffee, his expression carefully neutral. Did you know your father made me executor of his estate? I blinked in surprise. No. I assumed Vanessa. Oh, she thinks she is, Marcus said, a hint of something, satisfaction? Flickering across his face. Your father signed 2 wills, Elena. My heart stuttered. 2 wills? The first one, signed 4 years ago shortly after they married, leaves everything to Vanessa. Standard stuff. He paused, lowering his voice even though we were alone in the hallway. The second one, signed 14 months ago in my office. While Vanessa was at a spa weekend with Judith, tells a different story. I stared at him, coffee forgotten in my hands. What are you saying? I'm saying your father wasn't quite as influenced as Vanessa believed. Marcus checked his watch. The official reading is scheduled for tomorrow morning at my office. 10 o'clock. I suggest you be there. Does Vanessa know about this second will? Marcus's smile was small but unmistakably pleased. Not yet. She's arranged for her personal attorney to meet with me Friday to handle the formalities, as she put it. But as executor, I've called an official reading for tomorrow. I've already notified her, though I didn't specify any details. Before I could ask anything else, the door to the reception room swung open. Vanessa stood framed in the doorway, her gaze darting suspiciously between Marcus and me. There you are, Elena. People are asking for you. Her tone suggested this was unlikely. And Marcus, I believe some of David's colleagues from the firm wanted to speak with you. Of course, Marcus said smoothly. Just giving David's daughter a moment of peace. This must be hardest on her, after all. Vanessa's smile tightened. We're all suffering, naturally. Now, shall we? She held the door, clearly expecting us to return immediately. Marcus gave my arm a reassuring squeeze as he passed. Tomorrow, he murmured. 10 o'clock. I followed them back into the reception, my mind racing. 2 wills. A second will that Vanessa knew nothing about. For the first time since arriving, I felt something other than grief and frustration. A tiny, fragile bubble of hope. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur. I mechanically accepted condolences, thanked people for coming, and avoided Vanessa's sharp gaze whenever possible. I noticed her watching me more closely now, her eyes narrowing when Marcus approached me again briefly before leaving. As the crowd thinned, Vanessa's friends gathered around her in a protective circle, murmuring sympathetically about how exhausted she must be, how brave she'd been, how they would help her through this difficult time. No one approached me with similar offers. Will you be staying at the house tonight? Vanessa asked as the last guests were leaving, her tone making it clear what answer she preferred. No, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I have a hotel room downtown. Something like relief flickered across her face. Probably for the best. I have so many arrangements to make, papers to organize. You understand. I did understand. She wanted to start erasing all traces of my father, and, by extension, me, from what she now considered solely her home. She probably already had realtors lined up for the summer house, appraisers for his art collection, buyers for his beloved vintage car. I'll be in touch, I said vaguely. Vanessa nodded, already turning away. Of course. We'll need to discuss what to do with David's personal effects at some point. His clothes, books. Nothing valuable, but I thought you might want some mementos. Nothing valuable. As if my father's worn leather reading chair, his dog-eared poetry collection, his old flannel shirts weren't priceless to me. As if memories could be sorted into marketable and worthless. How thoughtful, I managed, gathering my purse. I'll call you. Her smile never reached her eyes. Do. Though I'll be quite busy with the estate matters. Judith has offered to help me sort through everything. I'm sure she has, I thought. As I turned to leave, Vanessa called after me, her voice honey-sweet with malice. Oh, and Elena? Your father wanted me to have his mother's emerald ring. The one you always admired as a girl? He said it suited me better. The ring had been my grandmother's, then my mother's. Dad had kept it after Mom died, promising it would be mine one day. It was the final twist of the knife, Vanessa claiming not just my father's possessions but the symbols of our family history, rewriting even his intentions toward me. I didn't respond, didn't trust myself to speak. I simply walked out into the cool evening air, letting the door close firmly behind me. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. The second will. Whatever it contained, whatever Dad had actually intended, I would know tomorrow. For tonight, I would not give Vanessa the satisfaction of breaking me. I started the engine and drove toward my hotel, the sky darkening to purple. Above the familiar streets of my hometown. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the dignity Dad had always taught me to maintain. But as I drove, I couldn't help wondering what secrets that second will might hold, and how Vanessa would react when she discovered that perhaps, just perhaps, she hadn't won after all. I barely slept that night, memories washing over me in waves as I stared at the hotel ceiling. Every moment with Dad replayed in my mind like an old film, camping trips when I was small, him teaching me to drive in his beloved vintage Mustang, his proud face at my college graduation. Then came the darker memories, Vanessa's arrival in our lives, Dad's gradual distance, the growing wall between us built brick by brick with missed calls and cancelled plans. The hotel room felt sterile and impersonal, much like the funeral had been. Nothing like the warm, slightly cluttered home where I'd grown up, with Dad's books piled on every surface and the smell of his terrible cooking experiments filling the kitchen. That home had disappeared the moment Vanessa moved in, replaced by cold minimalist furniture and artwork chosen to impress rather than comfort. I reached for my phone, scrolling through old photos. Dad and me at the summer house 3 years ago, one of our last weekends alone together before Vanessa insisted on accompanying him everywhere. His smile looked strained even then, though I hadn't noticed it at the time. Was he already sick? Already keeping secrets about his health? A text message alert broke my reverie, a number I didn't recognize. It's Marcus. Got your number from your father's contacts. Be careful tomorrow. Vanessa has powerful friends. Delete this message. I stared at the cryptic warning, a chill running down my spine. Then I deleted the message as instructed and tried once more to sleep. Morning came with gray skies and a fine drizzle that suited my mood perfectly. I dressed with care, a simple navy dress that had been a gift from Dad, pearl earrings that had belonged to Mom, and a light jacket against the spring chill. Looking in the mirror, I saw shadows under my eyes but also a determination that hadn't been there yesterday. Marcus's law office occupied the entire top floor of one of the oldest buildings downtown. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a silver-haired woman looked up from her desk. "Elena Bennett?" she asked with a warm smile. "I'm Grace, Marcus's assistant. We spoke on the phone a few times when your father would visit." I nodded, suddenly recognizing her voice. "You always made sure he had those terrible peppermint candies he liked." Grace laughed softly. "And made sure he didn't eat too many. Your father had quite the sweet tooth." Her expression sobered. "I'm so sorry for your loss, dear. He spoke of you often." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. At least here, in this office, someone remembered that I was David Bennett's daughter, not an inconvenient leftover from a previous marriage. "Is Marcus ready?" I asked, blinking rapidly. "He's in the conference room. Vanessa arrived about 10 minutes ago with her sister and her attorney." Grace lowered her voice. "Just so you know, she wasn't pleased to learn about this meeting." I could imagine. Vanessa hated surprises she couldn't control. Grace led me down a hallway lined with framed law degrees and photographs of Marcus with various dignitaries. At the end of the hall, she paused outside a heavy wooden door. "Your father was a good man," she said quietly. "And he was sharper than people gave him credit for, right up until the end." Before I could respond, she opened the door, and I stepped into what felt like the final act of a play I hadn't realized I was part of. The conference room was imposing, all dark wood and leather chairs surrounding a massive table. Tall windows overlooked the rainy downtown streets, casting a grayish light across the space. At the head of the table sat Marcus, papers arranged neatly before him, his bow tie as crooked as ever. To his right sat Vanessa, immaculate in black, not a hair out of place despite the humidity. Beside her was Judith, wearing an expression of barely concealed annoyance, and a thin man in an expensive suit who I assumed was their attorney. His cold eyes assessed me as I entered, dismissing me almost immediately. "Elena," Marcus rose, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." The only empty chair was directly across from Vanessa. I took it, feeling her eyes on me like laser beams as I settled my purse beside me. "I still don't understand why this couldn't wait until Friday," Vanessa said, addressing Marcus while pointedly ignoring me. "Richard and I had already arranged to meet with you then." She gestured to the thin attorney, who nodded in agreement. "As executor of David's estate, it's my duty to proceed according to his wishes," Marcus replied calmly. And his wishes were quite specific about the timeline. Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails tapped against the polished table. "Fine. Let's get this over with. I have a meeting with the real estate agent at noon." My stomach tightened. Less than 24 hours after the funeral, and she was already selling his property. Marcus cleared his throat, unfolding a pair of reading glasses and placing them carefully on his nose. I'll begin with the formalities. We are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of David James Bennett. He lifted a document bearing my father's familiar signature. This will, dated March 15 of last year, supersedes all previous wills and codicils. Vanessa straightened, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. March 15 was their anniversary, exactly a year and a half ago. I knew she was thinking this boded well for her. Marcus continued, his voice steady and professional. I, David James Bennett, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Standard legal language followed, revocations of prior wills, appointment of Marcus as executor, provisions for payment of debts. Vanessa's attorney jotted occasional notes, while Judith checked her watch repeatedly. The rain outside intensified, pattering against the windows like impatient fingers. Now, regarding the distribution of my estate, Marcus read, and the room seemed to still. To my wife, Vanessa Claire Bennett, I leave the sum of $50,000. The pen in Vanessa's hand clattered to the table. Excuse me? Marcus continued as if he hadn't heard her. This sum represents the approximate value of gifts and financial support I have provided to her family over the course of our marriage, including but not limited to the financing of her sister Judith's failed interior design business and the settlement of her personal credit card debt accrued prior to our marriage. Judith made a choking sound. Vanessa's face had gone completely white, 2 spots of color burning high on her cheeks. This is absurd, her attorney interjected. Mr. Harrington, surely you're aware of the previous will that left the entire estate to Mrs. Bennett. I am aware of it, Marcus acknowledged. As I mentioned, this document supersedes all previous wills. If you'll allow me to continue? Vanessa's hands were shaking now. There must be some mistake. David would never, to my daughter, Elena Marie Bennett, Marcus continued, raising his voice slightly, I leave my primary residence at 1482, Oakwood Drive, all its contents, my summer house at Lake Miramichi, my investment portfolio, my share in Bennett and Harrington law firm, and the remainder of my financial assets. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause momentarily. This is outrageous, Vanessa finally sputtered. He was ill. Clearly not in his right mind when he signed this. On the contrary, Marcus said mildly. David was evaluated by 2 independent physicians on the day he signed this will, specifically to prevent such challenges. Their signed statements confirming his mental competence are attached as appendices. Vanessa turned to her attorney, who was frantically flipping through his own documents. Richard, do something. The attorney looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Bennett, if these medical evaluations are legitimate, of course they're not legitimate. Vanessa's voice rose sharply. This whole thing is a setup. Marcus removed his reading glasses, fixing Vanessa with a steady gaze. There's more, Mrs. Bennett. Perhaps you'd like to hear it before making accusations. She fell silent, her breathing fast and shallow. In a personal letter to be delivered to my daughter, Marcus continued, I have explained my reasons for this decision, including my discovery that Mrs. Bennett has systematically alienated Elena from my life through deliberate deception, including but not limited to intercepting phone calls, discarding correspondence, and providing false information about my health and whereabouts. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Dad had known. All this time, he had known what she was doing. Additionally, Marcus read, I have provided documentation of Mrs. Bennett's misappropriation of family heirlooms intended for my daughter, unauthorized access to my personal accounts, and consultation with real estate agents regarding the sale of my properties while I was still living. Judith was now staring at her sister in horror. The attorney had stopped taking notes entirely. This is slander, Vanessa hissed. There are signed affidavits, Marcus interrupted, from household staff, my personal nurse, and several family friends attesting to these actions. David was quite thorough. He reached into a folder and withdrew a sealed envelope, handing it to me. This is the personal letter mentioned in the will. David asked that you read it privately. I took the envelope with trembling fingers, recognizing Dad's handwriting immediately. My name, written in his distinctive slanted script, blurred through sudden tears. This meeting is over, Vanessa announced, standing abruptly. Richard, we're contesting this immediately. I want emergency injunctions, forensic analysis of the signature, everything. Her attorney looked distinctly uncomfortable. Mrs. Bennett, given the medical certifications and affidavits mentioned, I would advise, I don't care what you advise, she snapped. My husband would never have done this to me. Never. Marcus remained seated, unperturbed by her outburst. Actually, Vanessa, there's one more provision you should be aware of. In the event that you contest this will, David directed that all evidence of your actions be forwarded to the district attorney's office for review. Some of what you did crosses the line from unethical to illegal, particularly the financial transactions involving his accounts while he was hospitalized. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You're bluffing. The documentation is in a sealed envelope in my safe, Marcus replied calmly. To be opened only if you file a contest to the will. David was quite clear about this condition. The room fell silent again, broken only by the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Vanessa stood frozen, her perfectly composed facade cracking visibly. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed at a complete loss. Perhaps, her attorney said carefully, we should take some time to review our options. Vanessa's hands clenched into fists. This isn't over, she said, her voice low and dangerous as she glared at me. You turned him against me somehow. You manipulated a sick old man. I met her gaze steadily, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. No, Vanessa. That was your specialty, not mine. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Without another word, she snatched up her designer purse and stormed toward the door, Judith hurrying after her like a shadow. The attorney gathered his papers. More slowly, nodding awkwardly to Marcus before following them out. When the door closed behind them, the tension in the room dissipated like a thundercloud passing. I exhaled shakily, looking down at the envelope in my hands. He fought for you, Marcus said quietly. Even when he was at his weakest. How? I whispered. How did he know what she was doing? Marcus leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking. Every one of his 72 years. It started with small things. Messages from you that Vanessa claimed never arrived. Events you supposedly cancelled at the last minute. He began to notice patterns. Why didn't he confront her? Why didn't he call me directly? He did try calling you, from my office phone when she wasn't around. But by then, your number had changed. Marcus sighed. And as for confronting her, he was afraid. My father wasn't afraid of anything, I protested. Not for himself, Marcus clarified. For you. And for his legacy. Vanessa had insinuated herself into every aspect of his life, his finances, his healthcare. He was genuinely concerned about what she might do if confronted directly while he was still vulnerable. I thought of Vanessa's calculated smile, her cold efficiency, her network of friends in high places. Perhaps Dad had been right to be cautious. So he created this second will, I said slowly. Marcus nodded. And gathered evidence, piece by piece. The household staff was loyal to him, not to her. They reported what they saw, your cards disappearing from his desk, Vanessa taking calls meant for him and claiming he was asleep. His nurse kept records of when Vanessa turned you away from visits. All this time, I thought he'd forgotten me, I whispered, tears welling again. I thought he didn't care anymore. He cared more than you know, Marcus said gently. Read his letter. It will explain everything better than I can. I clutched the envelope tighter, not ready yet to open it, to hear my father's voice one last time. What happens now? I asked instead. Practically speaking? The house is yours. The summer house too. The financial assets will take a bit longer to transfer, but as executor, I can begin that process immediately. Marcus smiled slightly. I doubt Vanessa will risk contesting the will, given what David had prepared as a countermeasure. She won't just disappear, I said, remembering the look in her eyes as she left. She's not the type to accept defeat. No, Marcus agreed. But David anticipated that too. The affidavits and evidence are still there, ready if needed. And I suspect once Judith realizes there's no more money to be gained from supporting her sister's schemes, Vanessa will find herself with fewer allies than she expects. He was right. Vanessa had built her life on appearances and calculation. Without Dad's money and status to sustain her, how many of her friends would remain loyal? I rose from my chair, suddenly eager to leave this room, to process everything I'd learned. Thank you, Marcus. For everything you did for him. And for me. The old lawyer stood, coming around the table to give my shoulder a gentle squeeze. Your father was my best friend for 40 years. This was the least I could do. He paused. Will you go to the house now? I nodded, though the thought of entering what had become Vanessa's showcase home filled me with apprehension. I shouldn't I? Before she tries to remove anything. I've arranged for security to meet you there, Marcus said, surprising me. Again, David's instructions. He thought Vanessa might not leave gracefully. A small, incredulous laugh escaped me. He really did think of everything. He had time to plan, Marcus said soberly. And a powerful motivation, making things right with you. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming in sudden sunshine. I sat in my car for a long moment, the letter on the passenger seat beside me, gathering courage for what came next. Finally, I started the engine and headed toward the address I'd once called home. The house looked different somehow as I pulled into the curved driveway. Still imposing with its columned entrance and manicured lawn, but no longer intimidating. A security guard in a discreet dark suit nodded to me from beside the front steps. "Ms. Bennett? Marcus Harrington sent me. The premises are secure. Is Mrs. Bennett inside?" I asked, hesitating. "No, ma'am. She arrived about 20 minutes ago, removed some personal items, and left again. We documented everything. She took, as instructed." I felt a wave of gratitude for Marcus's, and Dad's, foresight. "Thank you." The front door opened with a familiar creak that Vanessa had never fixed despite her renovations. Inside, the house smelled of expensive candles and furniture polish, not the warm, lived-in scent I remembered from childhood. The entryway opened into a formal living room where everything was arranged for show rather than comfort. I wandered through rooms that should have felt familiar but didn't. Vanessa had removed almost every trace of our family history, replacing Dad's comfortable old furniture with designer pieces, his beloved artwork with trendy abstracts, his collections with empty decorative vessels. It was like walking through a high-end furniture showroom. Upstairs, I paused outside Dad's study, the one room Vanessa had never quite managed to colonize. The door was ajar, and I pushed it open slowly, holding my breath. Here, finally, was a space I recognized. Dad's worn leather chair still sat behind his massive oak desk. His bookshelves still overflowed with legal texts, mysteries, and the history books he loved. His reading glasses lay on a side table beside a half-empty cup of tea, as if he'd just stepped out momentarily. I sank into his chair, inhaling the lingering scent of his aftershave, and finally allowed myself to cry, for the father I'd lost, for the years stolen from us, for the painful truth that he had known and suffered in silence. When the tears subsided, I reached for the letter that had been burning a hole in my pocket since leaving Marcus's office. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the pages covered in Dad's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Elena," it began, and I could almost hear his voice, warm and steady as it had always been. "If you're reading this, then Marcus has done as I asked, and you know the truth. I owe you so many apologies, more than this letter can contain. But I'll start with the most important one. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for us. I'm sorry I let her come between us." I paused, drawing a shaky breath before continuing. By the time I realized what Vanessa was doing, I was already sicker than I let anyone know. The doctors gave me a year at most. I could have confronted her, divorced her, but the treatments were experimental and expensive. Insurance wouldn't cover everything, and I needed to ensure there would be enough left for you when I was gone. My heart ached at the thought of him enduring not just illness, but Vanessa's manipulations, all while trying to protect me. So I made a plan instead. With Marcus's help, I documented everything, every lie, every intercepted call, every lost message. I created this second will when Vanessa took Judith to that spa weekend, the same weekend she told you I was too ill for visitors. I wasn't too ill. I was waiting for you, but you never came because she never gave you my message. Tears blurred the words again, and I wiped them away impatiently, needing to read every word. "I know you must have felt abandoned, forgotten. The thought of that breaks my heart more than anything else. But please believe me when I say you were in my thoughts every day. The photo of you and your mother that I kept in my wallet, the one Vanessa kept accidentally misplacing, was my talisman through every treatment, every bad day." The letter continued, detailing how he had hidden his worsening condition from everyone, how he had worked with Marcus to create unassailable legal protections for his true wishes, how he had fought to stay alive long enough to ensure everything was in place. "The summer house is exactly as we left it that last weekend together. I made sure Vanessa never changed a thing there, though she certainly tried. Your mother's books are still on the shelves. The garden might need some attention, but the roses she loved so much are still blooming every summer." I smiled through my tears, remembering how Mom had tended those roses with such care, teaching me the names of each variety. "I've left everything in order for you. The house, the summer place, enough money that you'll never have to worry. But the most important thing isn't any possession or property. It's the truth. You weren't forgotten. You weren't unloved. You weren't unwanted. Vanessa's greatest cruelty was making you believe otherwise." The final paragraph was written in a shakier hand, and I could imagine him struggling to finish as his strength waned. "My greatest regret is that I won't see you build your life with the freedom this inheritance should provide. I won't see you fall in love, have children if you choose to, pursue your dreams without financial constraints. But I'll be watching in whatever way the universe allows. And I'll be so proud, Elena. I always have been. All my love, Dad. I held the pages to my chest, eyes closed, feeling something inside me heal even as my heart broke anew. He had known. He had fought for me in his own way. He had never forgotten. A noise from downstairs startled me, the front door opening and closing. I tensed, wondering if Vanessa had returned despite the security guard. Tucking the letter safely back into its envelope, I moved cautiously to the study door. Elena? A familiar voice called up the stairs. It's Grace from Marcus's office. I've brought some things you might need. I exhaled in relief, wiping my eyes as I descended the stairs. Grace stood in the entryway, several bags and a file box at her feet. Marcus thought you might want these right away, she explained, indicating the box. Your father's personal papers, photos, some keepsakes he asked Marcus to keep safe. I peered into the box, spotting familiar albums and frames wrapped carefully in tissue paper. Thank you. Grace smiled gently. And I took the liberty of bringing some groceries. She lifted one of the bags. Marcus mentioned you might be staying here tonight, and I doubted there was any real food in the house. Vanessa never was much of a cook. The simple kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes. That's very thoughtful. Your father was always good to all of us at the firm, Grace said simply. This is the least we could do. She hesitated, then added, if you need anything else, anything at all, you have Marcus's number. And mine is on his business card, too. After she left, I carried the box of Dad's treasured possessions up to his study and began unwrapping each item. Family photos Vanessa had banished to storage. Mom's small jewelry box that I had believed lost. Albums documenting my childhood that I had feared destroyed. Among them was a small velvet pouch. I opened it, and my grandmother's emerald ring slid into my palm, the very ring Vanessa had claimed at the funeral. Dad had kept it safe all along, knowing how much it meant to me. Standing in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by these reclaimed pieces of our shared history, I felt my father's presence more strongly than I had at the sterile funeral Vanessa had orchestrated. Here, among his books and belongings, I could almost hear his laugh, almost feel his hand on my shoulder. I know, Dad, I whispered to the empty room. I know you didn't forget me. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond our understanding, I hoped he heard me. I spent that first night in Dad's study, curled up in his leather chair with an old quilt I'd found in the linen closet. Sleep came surprisingly easily, wrapped in the familiar scents of his books and aftershave. When morning light filtered through the windows, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. This house, my house now, needed to breathe again. It needed to shed the cold, showroom perfection Vanessa had imposed and remember what it was like to be a home. I started in the kitchen, making coffee in the complicated European machine Vanessa had installed, then rummaging through the groceries Grace had thoughtfully provided. As I scrambled eggs and toasted bread, I found myself humming, something I hadn't done since before Dad got sick. The simple act of preparing food in this kitchen felt like reclaiming territory, like planting a flag that declared, I belong here. After breakfast, I began a systematic exploration of the house, opening drawers and closets, taking inventory of what remained and what had been removed. In the master bedroom, Vanessa had left behind only the furniture, taking her designer clothes and jewelry. Good riddance. I had no desire to sleep in what had been their shared space anyway. Instead, I moved into my old bedroom, which Vanessa had converted into a meditation space with a yoga mat and expensive sound system. The pale blue walls I had once covered with posters had been painted an austere white. The window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading had been stripped of its cushions and repurposed as storage for yoga blocks. We'll fix that, I murmured. To the empty room, already planning to restore it to something that felt like mine again. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I tensed, wondering if Vanessa had returned, but when I peered through the peephole, I saw Grace standing on the porch with a young woman I didn't recognize. Hope we're not intruding, Grace said when I opened the door. This is Lucia. She was your father's home health aide for the last 6 months. Lucia was petite with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Miss Bennett, she said, extending her hand. I'm glad to finally meet you properly. Finally? I echoed, confused. I saw you a few times, she explained. When you came to visit. Mrs. Bennett always sent me away and said she'd call me when you left, but I knew she was turning you away. A lump formed in my throat. You knew about that? Lucia nodded, her expression solemn. Your father talked about you all the time. He kept your photo by his bed. Mrs. Bennett would remove it when she was around, but I always put it back. That's actually why we're here, Grace interjected. Lucia has something for you. Lucia reached into her bag and withdrew a small, leather-bound book. Your father's journal. He asked me to keep it safe and make sure you got it if. She trailed off, but I understood. If he died before he could give it to me himself. I took the journal with trembling hands. Thank you. Both of you. There's something else, Lucia added hesitantly. Mrs. Bennet fired me 2 weeks before. Your father passed. Said they didn't need my services anymore. But I was worried, so I kept checking on him when she was out. The day before he died, he gave me this. She handed me a small USB drive. He said it had important recordings on it. That you would understand when the time came. Recordings? What had Dad been doing in those final days? Would you like to come in? I asked, suddenly not wanting to be alone with these new pieces of the puzzle. Grace checked her watch. I need to get back to the office, but perhaps Lucia could stay? She knows more about your father's final months than anyone. After Grace left, Lucia and I settled in the kitchen with fresh coffee. Unlike the rest of the house, which felt like a museum, the kitchen with its morning light and the scent of coffee felt almost normal. Tell me about him, I said quietly. At the end. Lucia's eyes softened. He was brave. Always more concerned about others than himself. Even when the pain was bad, he never complained. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. He worried about you constantly. Kept asking if you'd called, if you'd visited while he was sleeping. I did call, I said, the old pain surfacing. So many times. Vanessa always said he was resting or at therapy or too tired. I know, Lucia nodded. He figured it out eventually. Started keeping track of when the phone rang and who Vanessa said it was. That's when he began recording their conversations. I glanced at the USB drive now sitting on the table between us. That's what's on here? Yes. He had a small recorder he kept hidden in his robe pocket. I helped him transfer the files to the computer. Lucia's expression turned troubled. Mrs. Bennet was different when you weren't around. When it was just her and your father. Different how? Lucia hesitated. Impatient. Cold. Sometimes cruel. She'd complain about the expense of his medications, the inconvenience of his treatments. Once, I came in early and heard her telling him that you had called to say you were too busy to visit, that you had a vacation planned instead. White hot. Anger flashed through me. I never said that. I would never, your father knew, Lucia assured me quickly. By then, he was already gathering evidence. Recording conversations. Keeping notes. I touched the journal, its worn leather cover soft beneath my fingertips. All while he was dying. He was determined, Lucia said simply. Said he needed to make things right for you. That it was the last important thing he had to do. After Lucia left, promising to visit again soon, I sat alone in Dad's study with the journal and USB drive. The house felt different now, not just mine legally, but mine emotionally as well, filled with allies who had known the truth all along. I opened the journal first, my father's familiar handwriting bringing fresh tears to my eyes. The entries began about a year ago, around the time Marcus said he had signed the second will. Confirmed today what I've suspected, the first entry read. Elena's birthday card never reached her. Found it torn up in Vanessa's desk drawer when looking for stamps. She claimed Elena must have thrown it away. Another lie. The entries continued, documenting a methodical campaign of isolation and deception. Vanessa intercepting phone calls, discarding mail, lying about my whereabouts to him and his whereabouts to me. Dad's initial confusion giving way to suspicion, then to certainty, and finally to strategic planning. Marcus suggests gathering evidence before confrontation, he wrote. Agrees V likely destroying communication. Will create alternate email account and try to reach you that way. Fear V monitors my computer. My heart ached thinking of him trying so hard to reach me while his health failed. I had changed my email several times over the past few years, trying to organize my chaotic inbox. Had he been sending messages that never reached me? Started recording conversations today, a later entry noted. V becoming careless, more open. About her plans. Mentioned selling Lake House once things are settled. Asked what she meant. She said, once you're gone, of course. Not even pretending anymore. As the journal entries progressed, Dad's handwriting became shakier, but his resolve seemed to strengthen. Bad day physically. Good day strategically. Marcus brought papers for new will. V at spa with J, convenient. Medical team confirmed I'm competent to sign. Sign second will leaving everything to Elena except token amount to V feel lighter already. The final entries were harder to read, both emotionally and physically, as Dad's condition deteriorated. Lucia helping record conversations. V fired day nurse for allowing Elena to visit. No such visit occurred. V becoming paranoid. Good. Means she suspects something but doesn't know what. The very last entry, dated just 3 days before he died, was brief but powerful, everything in place. Evidence secured. Elena will know the truth. Can rest now. I closed the journal, pressing it to my chest as if I could absorb my father's strength and determination through its pages. Then I turned to my laptop and inserted the USB drive. The drive contained dozens of audio files, each labeled with a date. With shaking hands, I clicked on the most recent one. Vanessa's voice filled the room, sharp and impatient. "David, you need to sign these papers today. The treatment isn't working, and we're just throwing money away at this point." "What papers?" My father's voice was weak but still alert. "Just some financial arrangements. The advisor says we need to move some assets before. It's too late for certain tax advantages." "Does Elena know about these arrangements?" Dad asked. A scoffing sound. "Elena? Why would Elena need to know about our financial planning? She's made it perfectly clear she's not interested in your life anymore." "Has she?" Dad's tone was careful, probing. "When was the last time she called?" "Oh, for heaven's sake, David. You know your memory isn't reliable anymore. She hasn't called in months." "That's strange," Dad replied mildly. "Because I asked Marcus to check the phone records. Elena has called this number 17 times in the past month alone." A moment of silence, then, "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus is confused. "I don't think he is, Vanessa. Just like I don't think it's a coincidence that Elena's birthday cards keep getting lost in the mail. Or that she supposedly cancels visits at the last minute. Or that she's suddenly too busy to see her dying father." Vanessa's voice turned cold. "You're being ridiculous. The medication is making you paranoid." "No, Vanessa. The medication is making me tired. You're making me paranoid. Or at least, you were. Now I just see clearly." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I know what you've been doing. Isolating me from my daughter. Intercepting our communication. Lying to both of us. And I know why." Another silence, longer this time. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed, harder, calculating. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. This entire conversation is being recorded, for instance. As were the last dozen or so. Including the one where you discussed selling my house before my body was even cold." A sharp intake of breath. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Check my robe pocket, Vanessa." "Go ahead." The sound of movement, then a clatter as if something had been thrown. "You sneaky old bastard." Vanessa hissed. "You think this changes anything? Who's going to believe you? A sick old man with a failing memory against me? I've been the devoted wife. Everyone's seen it. Everyone knows it." "Perhaps," Dad agreed, his voice remarkably calm. "But in case of a dispute, evidence tends to matter more than reputation. And I have quite a collection of evidence at this point." "What do you want?" Vanessa demanded. "Money? Fine. Name your price." Dad's laugh was soft but genuine. "That's always been your mistake, Vanessa. Thinking everything and everyone has a price. I don't want your money, which, incidentally, was my money to begin with. I want my daughter back in my life. For whatever time I have left." "That's not happening," Vanessa said flatly. "She's turned you against me somehow. Poisoned you with lies." "No, Vanessa. You did that all by yourself." A pause, then Dad's voice continued, stronger now. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue playing the devoted wife publicly. You're going to stop interfering with Elena's attempts to contact me. And after I'm gone, you're going to discover that your plans for my estate have hit a significant snag." "What have you done?" Alarm crept into Vanessa's tone. "Let's call it insurance. A way to make sure that even if I don't live to see justice done, it will find its way to you eventually." The recording ended there. I sat motionless, absorbing the quiet dignity and resolve in my father's voice even as his body failed him. He had confronted Vanessa in his own way, on his own terms, making sure the truth would outlive him. I spent the rest of the day listening to recordings and reading journal entries, piecing together the full extent of Vanessa's deception and my father's counterstrategy. By evening, I was emotionally exhausted but filled with a strange sense of peace. Dad had known the truth. He hadn't forgotten me, hadn't rejected me. He had fought for me until the very end. As twilight settled over the house, I made a simple dinner from Grace's groceries and ate at the kitchen island, surrounded by the evidence of my father's love and foresight. The house no longer felt like Vanessa's showcase. It was becoming mine. Again, filled with the truth instead of her carefully constructed illusions. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing, startling me. The security guard Marcus had arranged was still stationed outside, so I wasn't concerned about Vanessa, but I wasn't expecting visitors. Through the peephole, I saw a woman about my age. With short dark hair, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I didn't recognize her, but something about her anxious posture made me open the door. Elena Bennett, she asked, her voice tentative. Yes? I replied, curious rather than alarmed. My name is Maya Collins. I was your father's hospice nurse for the last week of his life. She glanced over her shoulder as if worried about being observed. Could I speak with you? It's important. I hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Come in. Maya entered cautiously, clutching a canvas bag to her chest. She was younger than I had expected, probably early 30s, with kind eyes. And a gentle demeanor perfect for hospice work. I'm sorry to show up unannounced, she said as I led her to the living room. I only learned today about the will reading. Lucia called me. It's fine, I assured her, gesturing for her to sit. What did you want to talk about? Maya set her bag on the coffee table. I was assigned to your father's case after Vanessa dismissed the previous home health team. She claimed they weren't following her instructions properly. You mean they were letting him talk to me, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Maya nodded. That's what I gathered, though. No one said it explicitly. Your father was very weak by then, but his mind was still sharp. He asked about you constantly. Did Vanessa tell you I never visited? I asked. She did. But your father told me otherwise. Maya unzipped her bag. He also gave me something to keep safe. Said I should bring it to you after he was gone, but only when it was safe to do so. She withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with roses, my mother's jewelry box. I had seen its twin among the items Grace had brought, but this one was different, slightly larger. He kept it hidden in a compartment under his mattress, Maya explained. Vanessa never knew about it. He asked me to check every day that it was still there, and to move it if necessary. With trembling hands, I accepted the box. It was heavier than I expected, the wood warm against my palms. The tiny brass key was still in the lock. Do you know what's inside? I asked. Maya shook her head. He never opened it when I was there. Just asked me to make sure you got it. I turned the key slowly, listening to the familiar click of the mechanism releasing. The lid opened smoothly on well-oiled hinges, revealing a treasure trove of memories. On top lay my mother's pearl necklace, the one Vanessa had claimed was safely stored, and that I had never seen again. Beneath it were photographs I had thought lost forever, Mom and Dad on their wedding day, me as a toddler on Dad's shoulders, the three of us at the summer house, laughing in the sunlight. But there was more. A small velvet pouch contained Mom's wedding ring and the matching band Dad had worn until Vanessa had insisted on replacing it with something more modern when they married. There were ticket stubs from concerts we had attended together, pressed flowers from Mom's garden, a lock of my baby hair tied with a faded blue ribbon. At the bottom of the box lay a sealed envelope with, for Elena, the whole truth, written across the front. He must have been saving these things for years, I whispered, overcome with emotion. Maya smiled gently. He talked about you so much in those final days. Told me stories about when you were little, about the camping trips you took, how proud he was of the woman you'd become. She hesitated, then added, he made me promise to tell you something specific. What was it? I asked, looking up from the box of treasures. He said to tell you, the combination to the safe at the summer house is still your birthday. What's inside belongs only to you. I kept my promise. The safe. I had almost forgotten about it, a small wall safe hidden behind a painting in the master bedroom of the summer house, where Dad had always kept emergency cash and Mom's most valuable jewelry. I hadn't been to the summer house in over 3 years, not since Vanessa had begun accompanying Dad everywhere. What promise? I wondered aloud. Maya shook her head. He didn't explain that part. Just made me repeat the message until I had it memorized. After Maya left, I sat alone with the wooden box and its precious contents. The envelope with Dad's final message remained unopened in my lap as I gathered my courage to read it. Finally, in the quiet of the evening, I broke the seal and unfolded the pages. My dearest Elena, Dad's familiar handwriting began. If you're reading this, then the plan worked. You know about the will, about Vanessa's deception, about my efforts to make things right. But there's more to the story, the whole truth that I couldn't risk putting in the official letter with Marcus. I settled deeper into my chair, prepared for whatever revelations might come. When I first became ill, Vanessa showed her true colors almost immediately. What I had mistaken for efficiency and organization revealed itself as cold calculation. She began questioning every expense, every treatment option, always pushing for the cheaper alternative regardless of effectiveness. She started talking about after I was gone, after she inherited, after she was finally free to travel and redecorate. My hands tightened on the paper, anger flaring anew. But her biggest miscalculation was trying to separate me from you. Perhaps she thought an old man with a failing body would be too tired, too medicated, too beaten down to notice or fight back. She was wrong. I could almost hear the determination in his voice, could picture the stubborn set of his jaw that appeared whenever he faced a challenge. The summer after my diagnosis, when you and I spent that last weekend at the lake, I made a decision. I knew my time was limited, and I knew Vanessa would try to claim everything. So while you were swimming that final afternoon, I went to the safe and removed your mother's most precious jewelry, pieces meant for you that Vanessa had already commented on updating or selling. The safe at the summer house. That's what he had been referring to with Maya. I also transferred a significant portion of my assets into a separate account, one Vanessa knows nothing about. It's not mentioned in either will because it's not part of my estate. I established it as a trust in your name, with you as the sole beneficiary. The details are in the safe, along with legal documents Marcus helped prepare that cannot be contested. My breath caught. Dad had created a financial safety net for me that existed completely outside of Vanessa's reach or knowledge. I tell you this not because the money matters most, it doesn't, but because I want you to understand that I never stopped planning for your future, never stopped trying to protect you, even when it seemed I had abandoned you to Vanessa's manipulations. Tears blurred my vision, and I had to pause before continuing. The hardest part was maintaining the facade, pretending I didn't know what Vanessa was doing, letting her think she was succeeding in isolating me from you. Each day that passed, without hearing your voice or seeing your face, was painful beyond words. But I knew that if I confronted her too soon, she would find a way to circumvent my plans. So I endured. I gathered evidence. I prepared. The final paragraphs were written in a shakier hand, but the words were clear and powerful. My greatest regret is that I didn't see Vanessa's true nature before bringing her into our lives. I was lonely, flattered by her attention, blind to the calculation behind her interest in a recently widowed man with financial security. By the time I recognized what she was, it was too late to simply walk away. My health was failing, and she had already insinuated herself into every aspect of my care. But my greatest comfort is knowing that, in the end, truth prevails. Vanessa thought she was playing a long game, but mine was longer. She thought she was the chess master, but she never saw my final moves until it was too late. Remember this, Elena, love is stronger than deception. Truth endures longer than lies. And sometimes, justice comes not in dramatic confrontations but in quiet, methodical preparation. I may not have been able to free myself from Vanessa's influence, but I made damn sure she wouldn't maintain her hold after I was gone. Go to the summer house. Open the safe. Claim what has always been meant for you. And know that wherever I am now, I am at peace because you have the truth, the means to secure your future, and hopefully, the understanding that you were never for one moment forgotten or unloved. All my love, always and forever, Dad. I pressed the letter to my heart, tears flowing freely now but accompanied by something new, a sense of triumph, of vindication, of a deep and abiding connection with my father that Vanessa had tried but ultimately failed to sever. Tomorrow, I would drive to the summer house. I would open the safe with my birthday as the combination, a detail that suddenly seemed so significant, so personal. I would discover whatever final gifts and provisions Dad had left for me there. But tonight, surrounded by the recovered treasures of my family history and the indisputable evidence of my father's love and foresight, I already had what mattered most, the truth. And truth, as Dad had written, endures longer than lies. The drive to the summer house took just over 2 hours, winding through countryside that was beginning to shimmer with spring. I rolled down the windows, letting the fresh air wash away the lingering heaviness of grief and betrayal. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt something like anticipation, a pulling forward rather than the dragging weight of looking back. Lake Miramichi appeared suddenly around a bend in the road, sunlight dancing across its surface like scattered diamonds. The summer house stood on a gentle rise overlooking the water, its weathered cedar siding and blue shutters exactly as I remembered. Unlike the main house, which Vanessa had transformed into a showcase, this place remained untouched, a time capsule of happier days. I parked in the gravel driveway, sitting for a moment to absorb the flood of memories. Mom gardening while Dad and I built the dock together. Learning to swim in the cool, clear lake water. Family cookouts that lasted until the fireflies appeared. The summer after Mom died, when Dad and I had sat on the porch every evening, sometimes talking, sometimes just being together in our shared grief. The key was still hidden in the fake rock beside the steps, another detail Vanessa had apparently never discovered. The door creaked familiarly as I pushed it open, releasing the scent of cedar and sunshine that had always meant summer to me. Inside, everything was draped in white dust cloths, ghostly shapes that concealed the furniture but couldn't disguise its identity. I moved through the main room slowly, pulling covers away to reveal the comfortable old sofa, the mismatched armchairs. The coffee table Dad and I had built from driftwood. No designer had ever been allowed to update this space, no decorator permitted to replace these treasured pieces with more fashionable alternatives. In the kitchen, Mom's collection of blue willow dishes still lined the open shelves. Her recipe box sat on the counter, handwritten cards inside arranged in her meticulous alphabetical system. I opened the refrigerator out of habit, half expecting to find it stocked, but it was empty and unplugged, awaiting its seasonal revival. Upstairs, the bedrooms waited in silent patience, my childhood room with its twin bed and bookshelf still full of favorite summer reads, the guest room that had rarely been used, and the master bedroom where I would find the safe. The painting that concealed it, a watercolor of the lake at sunset that Mom had painted our first summer here, hung slightly crooked on the wall opposite the bed. I lifted it carefully, revealing the small wall safe behind it. The combination pad glowed faintly as I touched it, still operational despite years of disuse. My birthday, July 22, 92. The lock released with a soft click, and the door swung open. Inside, nestled on a velvet cloth, lay an array of jewelry I recognized immediately, Mom's diamond earrings that she had worn only on special occasions, her sapphire pendant that matched her eyes, the charm bracelet Dad had given her on their 10th anniversary with tiny silver symbols representing milestones in their life together. Beside these treasures was a thick manila envelope and a smaller white one with my name written on it. I took both, along with the jewelry, and carried them downstairs to the sunlit porch where Dad and I had spent so many evenings. The white envelope contained a brief note in Dad's handwriting, Elena, the combination was always your birthday because you were always the key to the best parts of my life. In the manila envelope you'll find everything you need, trust documents, account information, property deeds. But the real inheritance isn't in papers or possessions, it's in the memories these walls contain and the love that built them. This place is yours now. Fill it with new joy. Dad, the manila envelope held exactly what he had promised, legal documents establishing a trust in my name containing over $2 million, money Vanessa had never known existed, the deed to the summer house, transferred to my name alone years ago, insurance policies with me as sole beneficiary, and detailed financial records showing how carefully Dad had planned to ensure my security. As I sorted through these papers on the same porch where we had shared so many conversations, I felt Dad's presence more strongly than I had at any point since his death. This wasn't just financial security he had provided, it was a final act of protection and love, executed with the same thoughtful care he had shown throughout my life. The afternoon sun was starting its slow descent toward the horizon when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Elena, he said when I answered, his voice unusually tense. Where are you right now? At the summer house, I replied. I found everything Dad left in the safe. Good. Stay there for now. Vanessa came to my office about an hour ago, demanding to see the documentation of the second will. She was not pleased when I showed her. A chill ran through me despite the warm spring air. What happened? She threatened legal action, of course. Said she'd contest everything, drag it through courts for years if necessary. Marcus paused. But that's not why I'm calling. After she left my office, my assistant saw her heading toward your father's house, your house now. When I couldn't reach you there, I was concerned. I left early this morning, I said, glancing at the trust documents spread across the porch table. Do you think she'd try to take things from the house? I think she's desperate, Marcus replied bluntly. The security service I arranged called to say she arrived with a moving truck and several men. They refused her entry, which only made her more irate. She's threatening to call the police, claiming you've stolen her possessions. I should have felt alarmed, but strangely, I didn't. Something about being in this place, surrounded by genuine memories and the tangible proof of Dad's foresight, made Vanessa's schemes seem suddenly small and futile. Let her call them, I said with newfound confidence. The house is legally mine. Everything in it is legally mine. We have the documents to prove it. That's what I told her, Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. But I wanted to warn you anyway. She's not going to disappear quietly. I never expected she would, I admitted. But Dad prepared for that too, didn't he? Your father was always 3 steps ahead in the courtroom, Marcus said. Turns out he applied the same strategy to his personal affairs. Between the evidence he gathered and the legal protections he put in place, Vanessa has no viable path forward. She's just having trouble accepting that reality. After we hung up, I remained on the porch, watching the sun sink lower toward the tree line across the lake. Vanessa's desperate attempt to claim what was never truly hers didn't frighten me. Dad had equipped me not just with legal documents and financial security, but with something far more powerful, the truth, and the confidence that comes from being deeply, intentionally loved. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. That house and everything in it should be mine. You turned him against me somehow. You'll regret this. Vanessa, obviously. I considered blocking the number immediately, but Instead, I found myself typing a response. My father saw the truth about you long before the end. He made his choices deliberately and with full mental capacity. There is nothing to contest, nothing to negotiate, nothing to threaten. It's over, Vanessa. Let it be over. I pressed send, then turned off my phone entirely. Tomorrow would bring whatever challenges Vanessa chose to create, but tonight belonged to this place, to these memories, to the peaceful certainty that justice had found its way home. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I made coffee using the old percolator Mom had insisted made better coffee than any modern machine, and carried my cup out to the dock. The lake was perfectly still, reflecting the trees and sky like a mirror. A pair of loons called to each other across the water, their haunting cries echoing in the morning quiet. I had slept better than I had in months, in my childhood bedroom, with its familiar quilt and the sound of wind in the pines outside the window. Here, away from the tension and drama of the past few days, I could think more clearly about what came next. The summer house needed work, minor repairs, fresh paint, garden restoration. The main house, with its cold perfection and lingering shadows of Vanessa's presence, held little appeal for me now. Perhaps I would sell it eventually, but the summer house, this was home in a way the other property had ceased to be years ago. When I finally turned my phone back on, it buzzed immediately with notifications. 3 missed calls from Marcus, 2 voicemails, and several texts. I called him back immediately. Is everything all right? I asked when he answered. Better than all right, he replied, sounding more energetic than I'd heard him since before Dad's death. Vanessa has withdrawn her threats to contest the will. Just like that? I couldn't hide my surprise. What changed? I reminded her about the sealed evidence your father prepared, the evidence that would go to the district attorney if she pursued legal action. Then I took the liberty of playing one of the recordings for her attorney. Marcus chuckled. Richard advised her in no uncertain terms to walk away cleanly while she still could. Relief washed through me. So it's really over? Not quite, Marcus said, his tone sobering. She's demanding a meeting with you. Says there are personal items of sentimental value that she wants to retrieve from the house. My first instinct was to refuse. The thought of facing Vanessa across a table, of hearing her lies and manipulations firsthand, made my stomach clench. But then I thought of Dad, methodically gathering evidence, patiently executing his plan even as his body failed him. He hadn't run from confrontation, he had prepared for it. All right, I said finally. I'll meet with her. But on my terms, not hers. I thought you might say that, Marcus replied. I took the liberty of arranging a meeting at my office tomorrow at 2. I'll be present the entire time, and she can bring her attorney if she wishes. Thank you, Marcus. For everything. Your father was my best friend for 40 years, he said simply. Seeing his wishes honored is all the thanks I need. I spent the rest of the day at the summer house, opening windows to air out the winter stillness, making lists of repairs and supplies needed. By late afternoon, I had cleared the garden beds enough to see that Mom's perennials were already pushing through the soil, hardy survivors just like the memories this place contained. As sunset approached, I sat on the dock with a glass of Dad's favorite whiskey, watching the light change over the water. A strange sense of peace had settled over me, deeper than I would have thought possible so soon after his death. He was gone, yes, but he had left behind not just possessions or money, but a final lesson in courage, foresight, and quiet determination. The next day, I drove back to town with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I wore Mom's sapphire pendant and Grandma's emerald ring, physical reminders of the family legacy Vanessa had tried to erase but had ultimately failed to touch. Marcus's office felt different this time, not intimidating but reassuring, a place where truth had prevailed over deception. Grace greeted me with a warm smile and a cup of coffee prepared exactly as I liked it. She's already here, Grace whispered, nodding toward the conference room. Alone. Her attorney declined to attend. That was interesting. Either Richard had truly washed his hands of Vanessa's case, or she had something planned that she didn't want legal witnesses for. Marcus met me in the hallway. Ready for this? I nodded, squaring my shoulders. More than ready. Vanessa sat at the far end of the conference table, immaculately dressed as always but with a tightness around her eyes that betrayed her stress. She didn't rise when I entered, merely watching with cold calculation as I took a seat across from her. Elena, she said, her voice controlled but brittle. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I nodded but didn't speak, waiting for her to show her hand. I'm sure Marcus has told you I've decided not to contest David's will, she continued, glancing briefly at the lawyer who had taken a seat beside me. While I still believe my husband was manipulated in his final months, I see no purpose in dragging his memory through lengthy legal proceedings. The audacity of her statement, implying I had been the manipulator rather than her, might have angered me before. Now it merely confirmed how completely she had believed her own lies. "What do you want, Vanessa?" I asked directly. She straightened, adjusting the sleeve of her designer jacket. "There are certain items in the house that hold sentimental value for me. Personal gifts from David, photographs, mementos of our life together. I'm simply asking for those to be returned." "Which items specifically?" I kept my tone neutral, businesslike. She produced a list from her purse, sliding it across the table. "Nothing of significant financial value. Just memories." I glanced at the list, then looked up sharply. Mom's pearl necklace, the one Vanessa had taken from me years ago and that I had found in Dad's hidden box. The emerald ring I was currently wearing. Family photos that had been removed from the walls when she redecorated. Even Dad's collection of vintage watches, including the one she had worn to the funeral. "These aren't your memories, Vanessa," I said quietly. "These are my family heirlooms. Items that belonged to my mother, to my grandmother, to my father. Long before you entered our lives. David gave me the pearls," she insisted. "And the emerald ring was a special gift for our anniversary." I met her gaze steadily. "No, he didn't. You took the pearls from my overnight bag the first Christmas after you married. As for the ring, Dad kept it safe at the summer house specifically to keep it from you." Her composure slipped momentarily, surprise and anger flashing across her face before she managed to regain control. "You have no proof of that." "Actually, I do." I reached into my bag and withdrew Dad's journal, opening to a specific page. "March 3rd, 3 years ago, confirmed today that V took Elena's pearl necklace. Found empty box in her closet. When confronted, claimed she sent it for cleaning. Another lie." Vanessa's face paled. "He kept a journal?" "He kept evidence," I corrected. "Of everything. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation. He knew exactly who you were and what you were doing, Vanessa. He just chose to fight you in his own way, on his own terms." She sat very still, her eyes darting between the journal and my face. "I don't believe you. David loved me." "He would never." "He didn't love you," I interrupted gently. "He saw through you. And he made sure that in the end, truth would prevail over your performances and manipulations." For a moment, Vanessa looked genuinely shaken. Then her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "You think you've won, don't you? The devoted daughter reclaiming her inheritance, exposing the wicked stepmother." She laughed, a brittle sound without humor. "How cliché. How predictable." "This isn't about winning," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. "It's about justice. It's about honoring what Dad wanted." "And what about what I wanted?" Vanessa's voice rose slightly. 5 years of my life devoted to a sick old man. Playing the perfect wife, the devoted caretaker. I earned that inheritance. You plotted for it, I corrected. You manipulated for it. You lied for it. That's not earning, Vanessa. That's stealing." She leaned forward, abandoning all pretense of civility. "You have no idea what it was like. The endless medical appointments, the medications, the sleepless nights. While you were off living your life, I was changing sheets and managing doctors and watching him deteriorate day by day. I would have been there," I said quietly. "If you had allowed it. If you hadn't intercepted my calls, discarded my messages, turned me away at the door. I would have shared that burden with you. But you didn't want help, you wanted control." Vanessa sat back, her expression shifting into something almost pitying. "You're so naive. Still the little girl waiting for Daddy to make everything better." She gestured dismissively at the documents on the table. "You have the house, the money, the precious family heirlooms. Congratulations. But what do you really have, Elena? A collection of things. I had him, the actual living, breathing man, for 5 years. You had his presence, I acknowledged. But never his trust. Never his complete love. He saw the truth about you, Vanessa. He just chose to play a longer game." Something in my calm certainty seemed to finally penetrate her armor. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across her face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since Dad's funeral. "The recordings," she said after a moment. "The ones David mentioned that day. What's on them?" Marcus, who had remained silent throughout our exchange, cleared his throat. "Evidence that would be of significant interest to the authorities if it were made public. Financial improprieties, elder abuse, deliberate isolation of a vulnerable individual from family support." "You're bluffing," Vanessa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Would you like to test that theory?" I asked quietly. "Or would you prefer to leave with your reputation intact, if not your expected inheritance?" The silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken calculations. Finally, Vanessa gathered her purse and stood. "Keep your trinkets and your moral victory," she said coldly. But remember this, I gave him something you couldn't in those final years: companionship, care, a reason to keep going. Whatever his journals say, whatever recordings he made, that reality doesn't change. I rose as well, meeting her gaze without flinching. You're right about one thing, Vanessa. You did give him a purpose in those final years, just not the one you imagine. You gave him a reason to fight, to plan, to ensure that justice would prevail even after he was gone. In your own way, you helped create his final legacy. She stared at me for a long moment, searching for a retort that didn't come. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. When the outer door closed behind her, Marcus let out a low whistle. Your father would have been proud of you today, Elena. You showed the same quiet strength he always admired. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Do you think she'll really let it go now? I do, he nodded. Vanessa's primary motivation has always been self-interest. Pursuing this further offers no benefit and considerable risk to her reputation and potentially her freedom. She'll find another target, another opportunity. People like her always do. The thought saddened me, not for Vanessa, but for whoever might next fall under her calculated charm. But that was beyond my control, beyond my responsibility. What happens now? Marcus asked gently. I thought of the summer house waiting by the lake, of the garden beginning to bloom, of the quiet dock where I had found such unexpected peace yesterday. I think I'll spend the summer by the lake, I said. Fix up the house, replant Mom's garden, maybe do some writing. I had abandoned my aspiring novelist dreams years ago, but sitting on that dock yesterday, stories had begun to form again in my mind. Your father mentioned you used to write, Marcus said with a smile. Said you had quite a talent for it. He did? The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it did. Even with the distance Vanessa had created between us, Dad had still known me, still remembered my passions. He kept copies of every story you published in college, Marcus confirmed. Proud as could be, showing them to anyone who would listen. Fresh tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't entirely sad. I think I'd like to try again. Maybe there's a book in all of this, not the details, exactly, but the essence. About truth prevailing, about patient justice, about love that endures beyond absence and even beyond death. I'd read that book, Marcus said, rising to escort me out. And I think your father would have loved knowing that something positive grew from all of this. As I drove back to the summer house that afternoon, I took the scenic route along the lakeshore, windows down to let in the spring air. The confrontation with Vanessa had been draining but also cathartic, a final closing of that chapter, a release of the last lingering doubts and questions. The summer house came into view just as the afternoon sun broke through a bank of clouds, illuminating it in golden light. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, absorbing the simple beauty of this place that held so many memories and now promised a new beginning. On the porch, I settled into one of the old Adirondack chairs and opened my laptop. The blank document was intimidating for only a moment before my fingers began to move across the keyboard. They said, "Everything's mine now," at my father's funeral. It wasn't shouted across the room, just a cold, casual statement whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. But those words cut deeper than the sharpest knife ever could. The words flowed easily, carrying me back through the journey of loss, discovery, and reclamation. Not just a recounting of events, but a distillation of what I had learned, that love leaves evidence stronger than any deception, that truth has a way of surfacing even through the most carefully constructed lies, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is the patient, meticulous preparation to protect those we care about even when we're gone. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the lake in shades of amber and gold, I paused in my writing to watch the changing light. A loon called across the water, its haunting cry echoing against the distant shore. I see why you love this place so much, Dad, I said aloud to the empty air. I understand why you fought so hard to preserve it. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of water and earth and growing things. It felt, just for a moment, like an answer. I returned to my writing, fingers moving steadily across the keys, giving shape to a story of loss and recovery, of deception and truth, of a father's final gift more precious than any inheritance, the unshakable knowledge that I had been loved, remembered, protected, that I had never been forgotten, not for a single moment. In the end, that was the victory, not the house or the money or even the exposed lies, but the reclaiming of a truth that had always been there, waiting patiently to be discovered. Love leaves evidence that no deception can erase. And sometimes, that evidence is enough to heal even the deepest wounds. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe. And turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.